Good morning, everyone, and welcome to our speakers for this panel. So during this summit, we are speaking a lot about how AI can revolutionize healthcare. But here is the hard truth. A recent study stated that 65% of US adults do not trust, actually, their care system to use AI in a responsible manner. That is our real challenge today. It's not about building only smarter models, it's also building trust. To be adopted, we need to have AI responsible, regulated, and understood. Understood by the patient, understood by the regulators, and understood by the physicians. This is the topic of our discussion today. We'll have two parts in this discussion. First, we'll see the state of AI in the different fields which are represented by our panel today. And secondly, we will share what are the key ingredients to build this trust. My first question is for you, Hugo. In your work at J&J, how AI is currently transforming drug discovery and development?
The short answer is everywhere. So what we see is that a few years back, there were all these small pilots. And what we now are starting to see, they actually are taking root, that's one thing. But the isolated pilots also start to connect, creating an end-to-end handover. So for example, in R&D where I'm working, we start with, well, those of you who have seen the Midas Touch, you start getting information on the target. Then the first question becomes, how should we address that? Should we address that with small molecules, with peptides, with antibodies? AI is going to help you with that. Now, regardless of where that answer lands, in which modality, if you want a design executed, you're going to have AI pre-screen it and virtually assess it before you ever are going to make it at a massive scale. So we're going to look at your on-target activity or tox. If you like what you see, we're going to try to help you with how can you make it. Can we make it in a single step? Can perhaps even automated systems already be of help doing that? We're getting really close to that. Or is this much more complicated and do you still need a lot of manual scientist attention? Even that comes into play. And the same technologies are then handed over when we go to development on scale-up. At the same time that people start asking questions like, where do we need to run clinical studies? Where do we see that the patients are so that we can move along and get this drug to the patients that need them as fast as possible? But also, can we reduce patient burden? For example, if you're a psoriasis patient taking part in a trial, can we avoid you having to visit something by having you take pictures of the evolution under treatment and actually use AI to analyze that? The statistical analysis is already a very well-known example, but much newer is, for example, multi-agentic, where the multiple players in the regulatory landscape are mimicked so that we can bolster the regulatory even before it is submitted. And the most important thing, and I'm going to round up there, is that all of those things start handing over information one to another, so it becomes this one end-to-end trail. And I think that's the most exciting, seeing AI move from these isolated pilots into something that takes root and starts getting connected across the value chain.
Thank you very much. Paul, given your work at Medtronic, it will be very interesting to have your point of view on how AI is changing medical devices too.
I think similar to what Hugo said, it's everywhere in Medtronic. Medtronic's the largest medical device manufacturer. We make all sorts of therapeutic instruments. But the part of Medtronic I work in is acute care monitoring. We make monitoring equipment. We don't provide a therapy. We provide information to the clinician as to the status of the patient. Is the patient deteriorating? Are they responding to a therapy that you've given the patient? And in order for us to do that, we attach a lot of wires and probes to the patients. We think the future, we need to get rid of those wires and probes. We think we can do that. We think we can sense touchlessly and take information from the patient. We can get respiratory rate, we can get heart rate, we can get contextual information. What's the posture of the patient? Are they at risk from bed sores and so on? So we're making a big effort across a whole bunch of areas of care using AI methods and sensing methods from cameras and other modalities where you don't touch the patient. You know, for example, in the NICU, we're looking at finding respiratory information. We're looking at activity of the neonate. At the moment, it's done contextually, subjectively, and intermittently. Imagine if we had a new vital sign which was activity. It was real time, it was continuous, and it was quantitative. In the sleep lab, if you go for a sleep study, you're covered in wires, and then you're asked to sleep. We think we can pull a lot of those wires off and do things remotely using AI methods. And another example, we're working with digital camera. We have a multi-partner consortium, and we're looking at contextual information of the patient. We're looking to make sure the patient who are at risk of bed sores or pressure injuries, that we can figure out what posture they're in, we can figure out how often they've been moved, and we can start to provide information to the clinician which will allow us to avoid those kinds of injuries. And in order for us to do this, we're investing a lot in AI, but AI needs a lot of data. And I know there's a lot of data out there, but if you've got a new technology, quite often there's no data at the moment. You need to go and get data from patients, or you need to do a clinical trial, and data is very, very expensive. So a lot of the stuff we're doing now is investing heavily in digital twins, synthesizing the kind of data, and then using that to train our AI, and then using the real data to validate the results from that information that we gain from our digital twins. So the future's going to be quite different. I don't think anyone believes that we'll have patients covered in wires in the future. It's going to be a long process, but that's the way it's going, and we're really part of this just now.
Thank you, Paul. We have also Kyutai representing Open Science. Patrick, how your work at Kyutai directly impacts patient lives today?
Maybe one word about the lab. So it's indeed a research lab. It's a non-profit open science lab which was started 2 years ago, funded by Rodolphe Saadé, Xavier Niel and Eric Schmidt. And we are a compact but very focused team working on foundation models, and we pick our research such that such a team can make a difference in front of the competition. And in particular, we have worked a lot on voice, because voice 2 years ago in particular was, in a sense, overlooked by the tech giants, and at the same time it's so important for human communication at large, and in particular for accessibility and also human dignity in some cases, and so which comes to the question about quality of life for some of the patients. And I'm here today to talk for the first time publicly. Actually, I'm very happy about that, about a project that we call Invincible Voice, that we've been working over the year with the French entrepreneur Olivier Goua, who lives with the ASL disease. So he has lost the ability of speaking, like many people in the world. And this voice-based technology which is open source, is a system which allows the user to be part of the discussions, the conversations with other people, the relatives, the colleagues, etc., in social and professional life, in a much more efficient and fluent way as what you can get with the current text-to-speech technologies. So the way it works is essentially what we call a modular system. So there is a very robust, high accuracy transcription of what the other people around the user are saying, and this goes into a personalized large language model which knows a lot about the patient and is able to propose in a well-designed user interface several interesting and relevant and diverse answers which can be easily chosen from by the user, and even a bit guided if needed or modified. And once this is done in a couple of seconds, then there is a speech synthesis module which utters the sentence or the answer with the voice and the speaking style of the user, and it does make such a difference in the way the person is participating to the conversation. So the next step is really to open source that, to communicate even more broadly. We are starting today in order really to say how important it is to record voice when people are diagnosed with this disease and they are still able to speak. So if you record that in advance, then it's a real asset for this type of technology down the road, and also to to motivate other developers, donors, even to take it from there in order to build systems and services around this technology. So really happy to talk about that today with you.
Thank you. That's very promising. We know that all this AI innovation relies on a lot of data, and that healthcare data is sensitive, it's regulated, and it's difficult to access. Hela, could you give us some concrete examples on how your work at the French government is helping the ecosystem better sharing this data?
Thank you, Paul. Indeed, we truly believe that we need to make sure that the tomorrow's system powered by AI that will be deployed everywhere in our healthcare system was built and are built on quality data and data that reflects actually the society and the healthcare system of the European citizens. So this is the idea that's behind the European health data space. I don't know if you guys heard of this regulation. The idea is pretty game-changing because it considers that when data is actually produced on a daily basis in our healthcare system, when I go to my physician, when I go to my hospital, when every day physicians, healthcare professionals actually create and generate data in the healthcare that they provide, this data needs to be designed to be reused. So the critical aspect of this regulation is that tomorrow every citizen has a right to opt out for the reuse of its data for innovation, but by default it will be reusable for every kind of innovation, research, or assessment project. So we in France are trying to be, let's say, in the upfront of the race to make sure that this data is available. We have here in France the chance to have one public organism that has been created in 2019 to make sure that this healthcare data is actually available. And now we also have the whole network of higher hospitals that have built data lakes at the level of their hospitals and that are making this data available. So what you need to do now is to make sure that we put all those actors, data providers into a network so it can also maybe lower the price for data access, as Paul just mentioned earlier. And we try to make that available in France by participating at the European level to every negotiation that goes from the prices for data providers, but also to the description of the data sets that will be available by every healthcare provider that actually make data available. So this will be quite of a game changer in the upcoming years at the European level to make sure that every member state have a common way to make sure that health data that it's produced in its own healthcare system is actually available for innovation, for algorithm training, and to build tomorrow's digital services that will be useful in our healthcare systems.
Thank you, Hela, and thank you all for sharing these real-world examples on how AI is really changing healthcare right now. But now the real challenge is still building trust, building adoption. Hugo, from your experience, what's the right balance with regulation to both ensure safety and accelerate AI deployment?
I'm going to have to give the answer that everyone dreads. It depends. Because regulation is about mitigating risks. And those risks, they are different in different contexts. if we look at a context where we actually look at deployed healthcare across the population, we're talking about a massive scale of patients, a massive scale of healthcare providers, and you have the benefit that you had a lead-in period experience has been built up, so that means you understand the risks. That means everything is in place, the scale is in place, the experience is in place, to be extremely rigorous, to put the bar really high, as Hela already elaborated. We have to protect that. And I'm very proud to be here in the European Union, where legislature has always reflected how the EU carries that at its heart. Now, at the same time, we also have to look at other contexts where that risk proposal may be very different. So if you look at R&D, for example, we do not have the scale, we do not have the masses of patients, we do not have the masses of healthcare providers, and we do not have anything that comes before, because the development is exactly the first line where you start getting an idea of what those risks are. So then the question is, if you put the bar at exactly the same height, you're going to stifle innovation. That is probably not what the intention is. And I'm very happy to see that both the nations in Europe, but also the European Union themselves, are taking steps towards a more risk-based assessment of those, and are taking steps in addressing some of the challenges. So what are those challenges? Well, for example, there was the cross-sector regulations that sometimes are inconsistent with healthcare specific, like, for example, the medical device regulation. So you have two different layers of regulation that provide some uncertainty because they do not necessarily. Now, we welcome the European Union for their engaging with the recent omnibus release, trying to streamline some of those processes, getting some of those ambiguities out. A second example, and there again I refer to what happened in France, is also happening broader at the European Union, that people also start realizing R&D is not the same thing, so they are accommodating the R&D exception in the AI Act, for example. And I think that's exactly the way how we can get a more nuanced answer to that. So we don't put the bar high in all situations. We put the bar high where you have the scale, where you have the experience that you can do that, but you want to avoid that you stifle innovation. You want to also continue to be a continent where you can actually drive this healthcare and drive this healthcare growth and enable AI, keep the prices available. And that's by also adapting and streamlining so that this becomes possible. And striking that balance in a more nuanced and flexible way is going to be the key.
Thank you. Hela, as a government leader, what are the other key actions that governments can take in order to help AI to scale in the healthcare ecosystem?
From our perspective, now when we speak with patient associations, most of them are waiting for AI to happen so it can end better care. So the idea now is more to make sure that healthcare professionals, healthcare providers are using that in a proper way in their organization, being at hospital or private practice. So what we need to do now for that to be, let's say, everyday reality everywhere in France and maybe tomorrow in Europe, is to make sure that we have a proper assessment of what AI brings to the table. So the idea, and this is something that we have been financing for the last 2 years, and we will keep on doing that, is making sure when a healthcare organization is trying something new with AI, we actually finance the assessment of what it has brought as quality of service, and better care for patients, but also efficiency, financial efficiency for the organization. So we provide a public assessment of what has been done thanks to AI, but also maybe to the risks that were addressed by the healthcare organization and how they managed to regulate that locally. And once you have that, once you have a public assessment of what it has brought to a particular organization, then maybe other organizations will do the same and will be able to say, okay, I can afford that because obviously there is a return on investment. So let's try it and let's deploy that. So this is something that we have been financing, as I was saying, for the last 2 years. We will keep on doing that. So we give actually money to hospitals to try AI in specific areas, and then once it is deployed, we assess it and we make the assessment public. So when you have a proven return on investment, you can be sure that other hospitals might want to try it and deploy that broadly in other hospitals. So this is one thing, and it can be easily, let's say, applied when the return on investment can be assessed and measured at the level of the healthcare organization that's buying those new solutions for any kind of therapeutic, from the hospitals again to the private practice. But sometimes we are facing solutions that will bring efficiency for the whole healthcare system, but none of the individual buyers have an actual incentive to buy it. For example, when we are talking about medical decision support systems, healthcare providers have no actual incentive to make sure that their decision is most efficient. But the whole healthcare system has an incentive for next year's prescription, for example, to be, let's say, cheaper, more personalized, more adapted to the actual situation of the patient. So this is something that will be trying, is to build actual economical models at the national level with the National Insurance Fund that is actually incentivized on efficiency. For example, if a medical support system is used in a private practice and that particular doctor makes more efficient prescription for equal level of care for the patient, then the provider of the medical support system will be paid on 10% of the actual efficiency economy that it made thanks to a well-designed and deployed system in the healthcare system in France. So this is something that was actually voted by our parliament last week. So we are pretty eager to try it and to make sure that we have national levels that are a way to deploy massively AI when it is actually relevant for the challenges of our healthcare system.
Thank you. We hear a lot about AI explainability, AI transparency. Paul, I would like to have your point of view on how these two can help building this trust that we are looking for.
Thanks, Paul. That's a good question. And there's lots of ways you can come at this question. So maybe the best way is to come from the regulatory aspect. The FDA, Health Canada, and the MHRA in the UK came together for a list of best practices for developing AI. 10 rules, or the 10 commandments we call them. Number 9 actually talks about providing clear explanations which are contextually relevant. And what they mean by that is, if you're talking to the clinician, what kind of explanation do you need to give the clinician? If you're giving information to the patient, what kind of information do you need to give the patient, especially if they need to give consent? Or even if you're submitting to regulatory, what kind of information do they need? You know, for example, if we're submitting a device for regulatory approval, there's a theory of operations. We have to go really into the weeds as to how that technology works. But if we're explaining to a patient that how AI is maybe interpreting a scan that they therefore may need a procedure from, well, that's a different level that we need to come in at, and maybe explain that AI has learned from looking at a lot of similar images that thing that's present in your scan means that it needs further investigation. So there's different levels of explainability depending on your target audience. I mean, we're actually in the thick of this at the moment. Again, we're doing another project with Digital Canada, where we're looking at suppressing alarms which are nuisance alarms. Now, a nuisance alarm isn't a false alarm. It's a small alarm, goes off for a very short period of time, it's inconsequential, the clinician isn't going to treat the patient, it's just a nuisance. And this happens a lot in various areas of care, but especially in the ICU and the NICU. So we've got a bit of AI, it can figure out if the alarm's a nuisance or not, it can suppress it a bit longer, and it gets rid of about 80% of nuisance alarms. But we need to explain that. So we're actually right in the middle of trying to figure out, well, when the nurses use this, they're going to see a pause. How do we explain that that pause may lead to them not having to take action? So these are big questions, and we're really spending a lot of time trying to figure out, well, do we give them a display? Do we put it in the kind of marketing material? Is it something that pops up on the screen? Or do we show them the bit of the signal that AI thought was the most important for making that decision? And you can do that kind of thing too with like saliency maps and so on. So it's a question. I don't know all the answers, but we're in the middle of it. But it just needs clear, rational thought, and it comes back to that. Who's your audience? What information do they need in order to feel comfortable? Basically, do they understand at the level they need to understand?
Thank you. With the recent developments and the recent AI models, it's more difficult now to control consistency. Patrick, how do you ensure that this solution remain reliable and safe after they are deployed?
So guarantees are difficult with modern AI, but at least there are maybe three answers to that. The first one is adaptability. I think it's important for the model to be able to adapt and be personalized to a given user or a given patient without needing the retraining. And there are indeed ways mechanisms to do that, to adapt it, either with a few efforts in training or directly through the context in the case of large language models. And these are really interesting research questions as well. So we are happy with the scientific community to work on those, and they are very relevant in this case. Second one is openness, and this is really, really important to us. Making sure that at least the foundation bricks of these tools are open, they are shared and open sourced, is very important for the transparency, at least for the possibility to audit them, so to build trust and to test them at large, but also to maximize the impact and to make sure that the benefit of these technologies are really shared as much as possible. And the third one is efficiency. At least as much as possible. There are many use cases, many applications where it really matters to have something which is small enough to run locally. It makes things more practical, obviously more sustainable, but also in terms of privacy and safety, I think it's very important. And this is the kind of things that put together can really help building the trust and then the adoption of these tools as much as possible for the people who need them.
Thank you very much. So we have seen that regulation, market access strategies, transparency, explainability, and also technology and improvement of this technology are the key ingredients to build this trust we need to scale adoption. Thank you very much for all your insights today, and thank you for the audience. I wish you all a very nice day at the summit.